Alright, welcome back to the next video in our series. This next step is installing the joists. Just a quick recap, we've got our sill plates in, our girders in, we installed our headers and rim joists yesterday. Now we're going to move into the joist, which is the main horizontal support of a floor. So when you walk through your house, you're not stepping on girders, and you're not stepping on header joists and all that. Most of your support comes from the joists that run across the structure. Okay, so I've went ahead and I've already cut everything. So I know all my math, and I've got everything cut, and you can see I've got a few boards staged here. And typically, this is what you can do to help speed up the process if you can get your cuts right, or even if you can run them long, especially if they're passing or butting, you can cut them. You can run them a little bit long and then cut them later. But stack them out or stage them, so as you're moving, all you got to do is flip them up and nail them into place. So staging really helps. But if you have some specific measurements, and let's say maybe your header joists and foundation and sill plates are just a little bit different, you're going to have to measure and then cut each joist one by one. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. The easiest way is to run your tape across, press on the inside of the far header joist, and measure to the inside of your closest header joist to you. Okay? Now, look at me, I'm checking on the tops of this. And this is the most accurate way to get a measurement. If you run your tape long, then you're able to turn it like this and get the measurement of exactly what you need. Now, some people will put it down on the bottom of the header joist and then put it on the bottom of the header joist on this side. The problem lies is your tape measure bends. It doesn't get exactly to that corner, so you kind of have to guess. Now, with experience, you can usually get this right, or within at least a 1/16 of an inch. Which, if it's a little bit long, you can knock it in place. If it's a 1/16 of an inch short, you can nail it in place, and it's going to be okay. But I prefer, whenever I can, to set the measurement on the top. Again, it's the most accurate way to do this. So I have 45 and a 1/16, which works out. It's supposed to be 45 inches. So I've got all my joists cut at 45 inches. Now, next thing is when we're actually ready to put these in, you have to fasten them down the right way. And to do that, there's a specific fastening pattern, which I'm going to let you know here. I talked about it a little bit in the last video, and it's one of those things that, every framing member, where it connects to what it connects to, they all have different fastening patterns. You can find those in your state's code book or the International Residential Builders Code book. For our state, it says, and it also depends on the thickness of the lumber. I mentioned that yesterday. Here's 2x6s, or 2x8s, 2x10s, 2x12s. Like if you had a 2x12, which is roughly this big here, and this is your floor joist, 3 screws are not going to do it. You're going to need 6 screws going down. But we're just using 2x6s. So for our 2x6s, we're going to end nail, just like I said yesterday, with the header joist to the rim joist. We're going to end nail 3 screws. Or you guys would be using nails. So 3 nails, 1, 2, 3 here, plus toe nailed into the sill plate on both sides. Also, where they meet the girder, you've got to have a toenail on those sides too. Okay? Now, so that's the fastening pattern, and this would happen on this. So for this 1 2x6 joist, I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Coming across over here, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those 12 nails, the 12 screws, will give it the proper strength especially if any seismic activity, any hurricanes, that will allow it not to shift, not to fail. And also, over time, a lot of houses will have some settling. This helps resist all of that. So you fasten those down for each one. That's when you're ready to fasten here. So here's question number 1 for you guys. Please pause, answer this question in your Canvas assignment. Is what is the fastening pattern for joists connecting to header joists and connecting to sills and girders? How do you fasten those together? Right. Pause this video, jump back over to Canvas, and enter those in, come back to the video, and we'll resume. Okay, since you guys have that done now, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the different ways joists are set up. I mentioned it the other day about, we have a very short frame here, but if this was 30, 40 feet long, you're not going to get 30 and 40 foot long dimensional joists. So there's a couple of options. One option is to have the joist run past the girder, and then you're going to take your second joist, run past the girder this way, and this is overlapping, or commonly called passing joists. So they kind of stagger. So if you were looking down the length, you would see the joist go back and forth across the width. Every 10, 12, 16 feet it would do this, depending on the size of your joist. And this is a very functional way to do this. You would toe-nail it to the girders, and then you would nail them together, as long as you have a minimum of 12 inches overlapping here. Obviously, the more the board or the joist overlaps, the stronger it's going to be, but a minimum of 12 inches nailed together. These are what's called face nails, so just straight into here. And I think it takes a minimum of 8 face nails to make this work. And this is, again, when you're doing your layout, you have to know that you're going to do this, because otherwise, if you set up like you run in straight lines and you're doing passing joists, it's just going to get confusing. So you have to know this step while you're working there. What I prefer, and I think it's the better way, it's called the butting joist method. And for this, you can just snap straight lines all the way across. All your joists are going to fall straight in line. There's not going to be any staggering of joists. I'll show you here. Because they would go back and forth like this all the way down your floor system. And it's a pain when you go to put the subfloor on and you're switching, and then you think you're hitting joist, but you're not hitting joist because it changes, and it's annoying. The better way to do this, what I like better, is the butting joist method. That's where they all line up in one continuous line. So they line directly up in front of each other. And to help hold them together, since you don't have that overlap, you're going to add a third board, which is just called a scab. There might be some other terms for this, but most people will call this a scab. Some people will say sister this on, but that's a slightly different term. We'll talk about that in the Unix level class. All right, so we run a scab on here, and what this does is this now connects these two joists together. Everything's toe-nailed to the girder. You have face nails going from your scab into joist number 1 and joist number 2. And the last requirement with this is your scab piece needs to be about 2 feet long. So 24 inches long, that's where it goes about 12 inches onto each joist. And you can use this, just scrap piece of wood laying around, as long as it's the same size as your joist. So if you cut some joists shorter in, you keep those, you can throw them on here as scabs. Makes it work pretty well. So again, this is the method I prefer. And so passing joists, the joists literally pass one another like this, okay? And they're fastened together. Butting joists, the two joists butt together, and then you add a third piece to help hold them together. And all your main joists are in line. So question number 2 for you guys is, what's the difference between or describe the difference between a passing joist setup and a butting joist setup here. All right, I'm going to pull this camera down here a little closer because I want to talk about the installation of these joists and exactly how all this fits in here. Okay, let's see. Get you off of there. And again, I am trying to do my best here. Okay. Bring you guys in a little closer here. Okay. You can see my layout lines from yesterday. You can see I've got my marks on the sill plate. That's my original mark. You can see the red chalk from my chalk line going across the floor system. You can see my X. And then I square it up again using my square, setting with the ruler edge on the sill plate, and then the raised edge coming up the board. I was able to scribe a line coming up. Then the same side of the line, I've got an X up here. Now, significance with this is you want to make sure that your joist sits on the X. It covers the X, but you can see the line a little bit. You just want to barely see the line as it comes down the edge here. And as you can tell, I mentioned it earlier, we've got all these joists. They're scattered, so they're set up. So all I'm going to have to do is roll them into position, slide them over, and fasten them. It's a very quick way to do this. It's a very easy way. It takes a little bit of setup, but it works out pretty well here. I'm actually going to move you guys over onto this side so you can see. All right. Try to get you guys close in as possible. There we go. All right. So again, I rolled, got my lines here, got my X's. So I'm going to cover those X's, and you can just barely see the line right on the side of this. Reach in, grab my drill, and I'll fasten it. I typically start at the top. It's easy to hold. Yeah, these screws are loud, I'm sorry. But it is what it is. Once you have it flush on the top, double check down here. Is it twisted? Because if it's like this, where you can see a gap here, or if it twists the other way, where you can't see it, hey, guess what? Just bring a couple little taps, get the bottom fastened in. I got 1, 2, 3 end nails here. Then I'm going to come through and toenail the side of this. There's one. Now notice on my toenailing, I did not point this out in my header joist video, but notice how far I came up before I actually started my screw. If I had started my screw down here, okay, odds are I'm going to split this wood. I'm going to split it and crack it, and it's not going to be good. So you want to come up about 1 inch to 1.25 inches, and you also want not to have a real low thing. You don't want 45 degrees. You want a pretty steep angle, something more along the lines of about 60 degrees. 60 degrees will get enough through into this lumber plus into the sill plate or girder. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to run my 5th screw on the other side over here. Okay, so we've got that set up. Now we'll come over here to my other end, and you can see it's a little bit off track. So I'll pull this over. Actually, since it's kind of stuck there, I'm going to get a screw started. Okay, I'm going to pull this over, get it to where it's lined up. Another point here is you want these to be flush. If you have a joist sticking way up, what's that going to do when you go to put plywood over top of that? Think about that. Okay, what would it do if this joist is sticking up and you go to put your OSB subfloor on top of this? It's not going to turn out well. So, cover up that X, line up your lines, fasten it down. You repeat this process, one screw in the bottom here. I think I hit a knot. Definitely hit a knot. That's one thing about drywall screws, is they have a very high friction coating, so they don't back out of wood. And if you hit a knot, it's tough to drill through. If I had some soap, some bar soap, it would make that easier. Okay. And again, one more in here so you guys can see the process. Again, up about an inch, inch and a quarter. Pretty steep. Again, doesn't split when you come up the right height and you're back in. You also don't want this thing right on the edge because, again, it's going to split. And if the wood splits, it's not really holding together very well. All right, turn you guys back around and look at our girder place here. As you can see the snap line. We're about a 1/16 off of the line here, so I could put my foot. I'm not going to get a whole lot of flex because it's a very short thing here, but if this is a 12-foot board, you could flex this over to your line and you're all right. And I'm going to flex as much as I can with it, and then fasten. And once it's in, you do both sides. And remember, there's 12 screws on every joist, and you're all set there. Now, let's get you back up over here. Okay, so this has one joist done. I would continue down the line, and usually what you can do is you set them up, fasten everything on this side, fasten, 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 fasten. Then you come over to the opposite side, knock them in place, fasten, 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 all the way down here, and then come back on your girders and get everything together. Now, if you're using multiple joists, what you're going to have to do is get the ends all fastened into one header joist, then come down to the girder, line them up, fasten to the girder, bring your next joist over, and go down the line that way. So basically be running header, girder of joist number 1, joist number 2 along this girder to the next girder, or with the header joist depending on the structure of your frame there. Now, I mentioned earlier about the fastening patterns for joists and where they connect to header joists, where they connect to girders, sill plates. It's all found in your local code book, your state's code book. The other factor here, and this goes in before any carpenters, work. It's the engineers, the architects, they reference this stuff. But if you're doing something on your own, you want it right, look at those code books. Because the code books are also going to tell you what size lumber, what size of joist that you need, compared to, depending on how wide your building is, how much weight is going to be sitting on your building. Okay? And the other option there is there's also several different types of joists. There is dimensional joists like these, which they would be 2x6, 2x8, 2x10, 2x12. And this is stuff that, if you're building a shed, doing a small addition, you're doing it yourself, you're probably going to go and get this. If you're doing a whole house and you work for a large company that's building 500 houses in a neighborhood, they don't use this stuff. They don't use dimensional joists anymore. They use what are called TJI joists, or wooden I-beams. They can come longer lengths, they're stronger, they're faster to install. So they use those. There's also wooden trusses. Those are fantastic options. If you have the money, invest in wooden floor trusses. It makes things so much easier, so much nicer in many different ways. We were fortunate enough to build with a lot of those. It's fantastic. It's a great system. And we've already discussed all this stuff in our video conference meetings. Remember, I went through those. I showed you guys on the PowerPoints there and pulled that stuff up. So those are just a few things that you want to know. So if you're trying to figure out what size material you need based on the size of your building and how far apart your girders are going to be, this is question number 3. Where do you go to find the size of your studs and the types of your studs? How far not studs, the size and types of your joists to determine how long they can stretch between supports. What type of reference do you have to find for those? So, recap of this video. We installed all our standard joists, and these joists are going to run all the way down the structure. I'll go ahead and get those things fastened in for the next part of this video. But we talked about the fastening patterns. We'll start with, we talked about how you measure this, how you get it laid out. It's a windy day here. My notes are blowing away. We talked about how to measure this. We talked about the fastening patterns, the different ways that joists will meet up over a girder. We talked about the installation process, where you put screws, how you put them in there, going down the line. We talked about staging all your joists, making it quick. We talked about different types of joists. Talked about where to find information on how far apart you can space your joists. So we covered a lot of information today. So remember, I asked 3 questions in this video. So get those answers in Canvas. That's how you're going to get credit for this assignment. Tomorrow, we're going to come in and we're going to put in blocking, boards that run in between our joists to help support and stabilize our joists. So that's going to be the next video in this series. Until then, make sure you caught up on your Canvas work. And if you haven't finished your SB2 stuff, finish your SB2 stuff. Stay current on Canvas. Get those video conferences, attend those meetings. That way you can get the background for this. And guys, just stay safe, be smart, don't get in large crowds of people. Stay at home as much as you can. All right. See you in the next video.